and that lets you examine the DOM of any page. The combination of that and the V8 engine that powers JavaScript in Google Chrome. So both of these things are heavily instrumented, and they expose the data that they can gather about a page to APIs, which the DevTools front end hooks into. And the last thing I want to say here is that the DevTools ship with all the standard distributions of both Google Chrome and Chromium. So if you use another WebKit distribution, you might be used to having to do some fancy incantations to actually get the DevTools to show up and work. That's not intended to be the case with Chrome. They're made to be very easily accessible. So next I want to look at a timeline of how the toolkit has come together. So starting back with Google Chrome 1 and 2, we actually didn't really have much or anything of a DevTools story. The developer tools that ship with these early versions of Google Chrome were basically just the WebKit web inspector. So we had, and I'm going to be listing out a bunch of different tools or tool panels here. Don't worry about them all yet, because I'm going to go in depth and explain them. But we initially shipped with some rudimentary support for inspecting your DOM. We had a JavaScript console as well, sort of standard things. Starting with Google Chrome 3, though, we put together a dedicated team to work on the DevTools. And you can see from that point on, we started iterating quickly over what the DevTools can do. So we added support for scripts profiling in Google Chrome 4. We added a timeline, a heap profiler, and a way to gather information about your offline storage. And finally, in Google Chrome 5, we've added this feature called audits. And we haven't just been adding new tools, but we've been adding features and improving the existing ones in there as well. So with that, I'm going to go into the live coding portion of this talk, and I'll show you what all the individual tools in the toolkit do. So I'm going to open a new tab here, and I'm just going to pull up a pretty typical page for showing you this stuff. This happens to be the DevTools homepage. It's chromium.org/devtools. And there are 3 different ways that you can open the DevTools from any page. So the first is to drop down a context menu and hit Inspect Element. You can also navigate through the Chrome tool menu. On Windows, this happens, which is what I'm using, tool. It happens to be under Tools, and then Developer Tools. And then the third way you can do this is via a keyboard shortcut, which is what I'll do. So on Windows and Linux, it's Control-Shift-I. On the Mac, it's Command-Option-I. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. And let me expand this window. So I'm not sure if this is still the case, but one of the biggest complaints that we always used to get about the developer tools were that unlike Firebug, they weren't docked to the window that you were actually working on. But it's actually always been the case that you could easily dock the tools to the window you're working on. In the status bar here, this first button is a button for docking, and I'm going to go ahead and press that. And that'll dock it into the window that we're actually examining. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see it better. So this is the first tool that we're going to look at. It is the Elements tool. And if you're exclusively a Firebug user, this should look pretty similar to what you've seen in Firebug. So we have, in our main pane here, we have a live DOM tree. And we can do typical DOM things like expand and collapse these different nodes in here. And this is, like I said, it's a live tree. So any changes that get made to the page that we're inspecting will get reflected in real time in the tree. So for example, if there's some sort of timer in JavaScript in the page and it's making changes to the DOM, when those changes get made, we'll see it immediately in this DOM tree. And likewise, I can edit the DOM tree, and in real time, the page itself is going to change. So let me show you a little example of that. I'm going to select this search, this text input here. and it's going to take me to that in the tree here. You can see it's built with an input element. So there's a couple of different ways that I can go ahead and edit here. I could just simply double-click inside an attribute and edit that way. I could also open a context menu, and I have a couple different options for editing. So I'm just going to pick here, edit as HTML, and it's going to give me that whole node as a blob, and I can really literally do anything with it here. I can make changes to it. I could also completely overwrite it. So what I'm actually going to do is I'll erase most of it here. I'm just going to keep a couple of attributes, the name and ID, because those are used by the JavaScript of this page. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this, this text box into a spinner. So I'll make it a select element. Close that here. And then I'm going to add a few options. So let's just say foo, bar, and Baz. So let me look at that quickly. I think that looks okay. So as soon as I remove the focus from this editable area here, this text box up here, can all of you see this code okay, by the way? I'll zoom in a second. So as soon as I remove the focus, this text box over here should turn into a drop-down menu. And there we go, it's now a drop-down menu. So let me, before I take a look at that, let me just zoom in here. There's the code that I just entered. So we now have this drop-down, and it functions as if it was part of the original page code. I can select between the different options, and I can actually go ahead and still hit the search button, and it'll still function. So I search for foo there, and it's finding documents on the Chromium site that contain foo. So let me navigate back here. So that's what you can do with the DOM tree. On the
So you need to complete for you, right?
what was that?
You had only written option and added the character.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to be well formatted. It's not as really auto-completing. It's not auto-completing as I type anyway, but it'll turn it into well-formed code after it's entered. There are other parts of the dev tools that will do real-time auto-completing for you, and we'll look at those later. Yep, go ahead.
So since you're type as okay, I see you got that transition. I wonder if it's strict or end your option.
Sorry, say that again.
What if it's strict instead of transition? I wonder if you change that to strict.
Still be technical.
Will it still continue processing parsing rates?
I believe so, but I'm not sure. It's a good question.
Excuse me.
Yep.
If I'm building elements and appending them to the DOM on the fly, like for example with Gaper or anything, they're going to show up
Sorry, if you're appending elements on the fly, what did you
with
say?
jQuery. Or
Yes.
They're going to show up.
Yes, exactly. Yep. When I show you, I'll show more about when we get into that use case about prototyping pages, how you can actually just add elements on the fly with JavaScript. Okay, so that's the main pane. The secondary pane here has mostly information about the CSS of the page. So let me select a node here. I'm going to select the body tag. And the first category of CSS info that we have here are the computed styles for the page. So this is all the style rules that the renderer knows about and has used to actually output this page. So this is the one area of this pane here that is not editable. But underneath that, you have the other styles that are being manually applied to the element, and you can edit all of those. So first we have the style rules that are being passed in through the style attribute, and you can see we have one here. And then under that we have the other selectors that are being applied to this element. So this is also, like I said, this can be edited in real time. For example, let's change the background color here. So I'm just selecting this value. I'm going to turn it into red, and as soon as I remove the focus, the page will turn into red. It's a little bright for me, so let's make that pink.